artists around the world. Teaching artists around the world. Artists around the world. Teaching artists around the world.
Well, I'll just kind of start off by just saying that we're going to hang out for about another minute or two while folks arrive. The purpose of this Q&A session is not just for the folks who can make it to our session right at this moment, but also so we can share the recording with people who are interested and couldn't make it to this session. And I just wanted to kind of get all of us together, have us speak a little bit about our class. Like, we have our course descriptions, but I think hearing us kind of talk about what we're excited about bringing people together around can be really informative for potentially our future students and deciding if we're the right instructors and these are the right classes for them. So that's kind of the agenda today. I wanted to also be sort of casual, like we are at TAAS, just like, I don't know, formalist stuff, you know, it doesn't need to be at the alternative arts school. So we can have more of a casual conversation. We don't need to have like something super formal about it. And for all of the folks who could make it, who are already here, thank you so much for coming. Please do put questions in the chat if somebody is in the middle of talking, but we can also open it up to just like open Q&A. I think we can kind of start by just kind of going around and doing like a little intro about our course, and then we can just open up and have kind of free-flowing questions. Does that sound good for everybody? Yeah, great.
Yeah, sounds great.
Does anyone want to start with telling us a bit about their class? Any volunteers? I can call on somebody too. Aaron, would you kick us off?
Right.
And
I could feel that coming. I could sense that it was going to be in my direction. So I'm Aaron Gach. I teach the class called Maximum Magic. My art practice is affiliated with something called the Center for Tactical Magic, which is kind of a collaborative authoring strategy for doing lots of different projects that mix together art and magic and activism, often interpreting themes of magic across a really wide spectrum of how we define that term. And I think for this class and for my own practice, one of the things that I find really compelling about magic is that it's a term that we use regularly. We clearly understand it, but oftentimes we fail to understand that other people may have a dramatically different definition of that term. So we can be speaking to someone about magic and you might mean tricks or illusions, but they might be hearing spells or rituals. And that kind of spectrum that spans everything from popular culture to ancestral relations to storytelling to spells and tricks and illusions, that is part of what gives magic its power, that it can be many things at once. And I think that's also oftentimes how it relates back to art, that as artists, we might say we're interested in art and we mean 17th century landscape painting, or we might mean neo-Dadaist interventionist performance when we say that term. So in this class, one of the things that I want to be absolutely explicit about is it is not a class about making art that is about magic. It is about trying to use our creative abilities to make magic. And this is kind of akin to saying that you could have a class on food and then the class turns out to be just painting bowls of fruit rather than making a garden or thinking about community relations around food or preparing a meal for your peers or opening a restaurant or that sort of thing. So in this class, what we look at is a number of different themes and histories of magic that span a variety of cultures, variety of histories. And we explore those in an artistic context, in a secular context, and in a spiritual context. It is not a cookie cutter class by any means. I've taught this class many, many times, and it changes all the time because it is highly directed by the interests of the students that take the class. So for example, last time we ran this class with TAAS, it was almost entirely attended by self-identified witches. And I see a wave already. So this very much set the tone for the work that we were doing in the class, the support we were providing for one another in class, the topics we were talking about. In many instances, the students in the class already had an artistic practice that was very robust and a magical practice that was very robust, but we worked on strategies for how to synthesize those practices and bring those to different audiences. So that is Maximum Magic in a nutshell.
Thank you so much, Aaron. That was so well put together and concise. I really appreciate it. We have some questions in the chat from Jay, and I'm going to read them out, and then you can kind of answer those how you see fit. Jay's asking, is alchemy part of the class? Is magic and spirituality part of it? And do you have a reading list that you could preview for potential students?
Yes, I can see if there's a way. I may be able to put in some of the reading material into the chat. As I said before, my personal magical practice also spans. I have a spiritual magical practice, and I also have a secular practice in performing magic tricks and illusions. And in my own artwork, sometimes both will be happening at the same time. I do not think that these are necessarily mutually exclusive. And the history of magic throughout cultures is on my side on this one. So absolutely if you have a spiritual practice, it is absolutely welcome. We get into that quite a bit. In terms of alchemy is essential to what we do as artists. Whether you define yourself as an artist or as an alchemist or as a magician, that practice of starting with an idea and looking for materials and forces in the world to transform so that can exist external to us and be shared with others is an essential part of the great work of alchemy. It's an essential part of what we do as artists. So yes, we again, the amount of time that we spend on something like alchemy will largely be determined by student interest in that topic. But yes.
Thanks, Aaron. Karen asks, are you going to do a full, like a longer class? And that gets me into the fact that this is Maximum Magic's intensive version. So maybe you can speak a little bit to your kind of thoughts around how the intensive might be different than the 7-week course, which we ran before and which we might possibly run again. And, you know, Karen, I don't have an answer for you there with a fall lineup, but we can definitely put that on in the notes and see what we can get to. But maybe, Aaron, you can speak a little bit to what is unique about it being intensive, and maybe what opportunities will this give the cohort? I think like just, you know, intensives have a feeling of really intense bonding through a short period of time. So maybe you can speak a little bit to that. Sure.
So the format for the course is we are going to meet for 2.5 hours at a time. And the expectation, more or less, as a sort of guidepost, is to spend an equal amount of time outside of class time on assignments within the intensive. So in the course meeting times, we are discussing results. We're talking about material that we covered. We're getting into some of the readings that we've done. And we're also kind of bringing back into the fold any experiences that were generated from the assignments. The assignments are kind of creative prompts that are designed to kind of push your boundaries or challenge you in the way that you think about art and magic. They are very much open to interpretation. For example, just to kind of frame it without giving away too much here, if we took a topic like extrasensory perception, like ESP, there is a ton of material within the realm of performance magic, theatrical magic, that looks at that phenomena and how to emulate that phenomena and how to incorporate that phenomena with objects, with sculptural objects, with imagery, etc. But there is also a ton of research that goes into how that function might exist within the human experience. And there's a lot of experimentation and exercises that we can do to play with that and to put that into action. So students in the past who are experimenting with something like ESP, some of them are looking at how can you create that effect in your artwork through illusionistic means. Others are looking at it through a relational sensibility. How can you think about incorporating some of those aspects into work with your audience as participants? And then some people are looking in their own practice and thinking about how can I bring in a kind of divinatory process into the way that I create work.
Thanks so much, Aaron. I'll give you a break from the Q&As back and forth, and we'll see if any others show up in the chat to cycle back to at the end. Thank you so much for that thorough introduction and the answering to the questions. Do I have any volunteers to go second? If not, I will call on somebody again. We're kind of running this like a class. Lexa, let's go. You might have felt my feelings of like, I'm going to call Lexa.
Thanks, Aaron. That was so, I get it.
Yeah. I want to take it.
Yeah. Hopefully I can express myself as clearly. I'm Lexa Walsh, and I'm an artist that was based in the Bay Area until a month ago, and now I'm based in the Hudson Valley and all over the place. And I am teaching a professional practice intensive, which I taught in the winter, and we did it in 4 classes in the winter, and it felt like it was really crowded with so much stuff. Carrie Hugans can remark on that. And so this time we're going to do it in 6 classes. And we're going to start with identifying who our community is, because I think our art worlds are actually really based so much on community, and there are a whole bunch of people in our realms that we know that we don't realize we know, and that we can have an exchange with. And then we look at goal setting and various ways of goal setting, from like big to breaking it down. Also asking why we have these goals, what we want to get from them, and then breaking it down into action steps. Refining them by doing some exercises. We look at ways that we're going to be in the art world, and ways that we can combine that. So like residencies, grants, open calls, commissions, teaching, artist talks, visiting lectureships, workshops, passive income, sales, and also like side hustles. Most of us actually have to have jobs, and that's okay. And those jobs don't have to be teaching jobs. And I think it's important to just like find the thing that allows us to still be artists. And then we go deeply into finding all of these resources. I have a lot of great lists of places to find opportunities, and to find the opportunities that are right for you. And then we're going to look at how we identify as an artist, and looking deeply into our practices and our artist statements, our project statements, what the difference is there, our elevator pitches, and then how we get our work out there. So like with documentation and lighting and photography, websites, stupid Instagram, and our mailing lists, and our websites. If I didn't, I already said that. And then also pricing, and then all the other resources that are out there if one would want to continue to have, like, say, a coach or take a class like a TAAS class or something like that. So it goes pretty deep. There's also a lot of homework, and then you're left with a ton of like PDFs that you can fill in to keep yourself organized, as well as other resources. So yeah, that's professional practice intensive.
Thank you, Lexa. It sounds really incredible. Do we have any questions? People can raise their hand, or they can put it in the chat for Lexa. Go ahead and filter those through if you have any. Lexa, maybe you can speak a little bit about, why would somebody might want to take a class like this at the alternative arts school versus, their local arts place, or maybe even just looking this up there themselves and doing some self-research. What's the benefits of doing this in a class at a global school like TAAS?
Well, first of all, with this TAAS class, you also get all the benefits of the TAAS community. So you get all of the artist talks, you get all of the resources, all of the community that TAAS has to offer. And if you are not a TAAS member, once you are one for life. And so you have access to all that TAAS has to offer. Another thing is that doing this in a class, usually classes cover one of these things or two of these things. This class covers pretty much all of the things. And it's kind of geared towards artists who make not only objects, but also projects. So, you know, there are ones that are geared towards people who just want to like sell in a commercial setting. And there are others that are geared just towards socially engaged artists. And I try to cover the opportunities that range a real variety of art makers, and kind of a holistic approach to all of that. And then there's the community that you get even just instantaneously with the small class. So we can make a what's the word? Sorry, I have a brain
Like
fart.
a contact sheet. Or
No, accountability partners. I have been working for 20 days straight, so I have to find my words. So we can make accountability partners. Like there's still an accountability group of mothers from my last class, because we realized like, oh, there's actually this whole stigma against parent artists out there, especially in the United States. Then in terms of an international crew with TAAS, like you're going to hear about ways to do things that are different from each person's location. So in Europe, for instance, you might send a PDF with your work samples, and in the United States, you're going to enter them through Submittable. So that's good to know. Like, and a lot of people that are even taking the class have also been on juries, and I myself included. So having kind of, I think, ultimately, I believe in that we are all students and teachers, and we are all students and teachers in the class, and we all give what we know and share it, and we are all better for it.
yeah, I remember like when I first moved to Europe after going through all my arts education in America, my most fundamental question was, where do I find opportunities in this country? And it just took like a year to find what the opportunities listings were that were in line with what I was making. It took forever. And so I imagine that like being around other international artists, they would drop in the chat, oh, this is what we use in, Portugal. And so you get a little bit of an insight into how the arts works in different areas and how to get your work out in those areas too.
And like my foundational theory is that we should be sharing these. We should not be hoarding our opportunities. We should be sharing them with each other. And I think that is also what TAAS stands for.
Definitely. And wouldn't the show be like so much better and more fun if your friend was also showing in it? Like that kind of like, you want to show with a community of artists that you really believe in. And so, yeah, sharing opportunities is always really important. Yeah. Any other questions for Alexa? We will pause for just a second and you can drop them in the chat. And I will be calling on Dmitry next. So he can have a couple of seconds to prepare.
Thank you. So it was a bit mess and some one office, but people moving, but I'm trying to concentrate, and thanks for your insightful presentation of the colleagues. So I'm Dmitry Vilensky. I'm more known as a part of collective Что делать, which have actually quite serious international career. And the topic of my class or workshop will be public art. And actually also luckily we have great experience of working with NATO in Toronto on monument to 100 years century of revolution. And then we have quite numerous different projects in different contexts, from Paris to Vienna, in St. Petersburg. Also, most of projects have strong pedagogical components, so it's a lot of based on participation. And actually in my course, we'll discuss, of course, kind of exemplary artistic practices like Thomas Hirschhorn, Alfredo Jarre, Tani Bruguera, and make kind of comparative analysis, what kind of protocols they use, what is the difference of using provocation or more kind of based on consensus work, and so on. But at the same time, it would make sense to make us together kind of simple practical exercise like practice. And actually for that, because my course will be very strongly focused on practices of commemoration and also different deviation of monumentality, which was actually our focus in many our own projects. And this time I offer to the class to work on altar, dedicated to any communities, to any heroes, human, non-human, whoever, but it should be the urgency to do it and realize in particular this place. And of course, every participant can choose their place and make a photos, documentation, also make kind of tribute to that kind of character or real people or real struggle, which might happen. And also we discuss a lot that kind of practical thing, because, you know, to do something public space, especially if you're commissioned, that's why also my title, it's about between mission and commission. You must have a strong mission to realize something, but it's some things, and actually public art, it's super expensive. It's one of the most kind of heavy things which completely undermine autonomy of art. It's not studio practice, it's permanent negotiation. It's where art comes so close to real politics, like it or not, because it's dirty things, but at the same time, through negotiation, compromises, we are managed to get real contact dialogue with a bigger community at large, you know. And I think for the artist, I find it's always very challenging, sometimes exhausting, but always exciting. So we hope to share this journey together, and I'm looking forward.
Thank you so much, Dmitry. I was gonna bring up this part of your title too, between mission and commission, because from my understanding of, you know, this term is it's, for me, it's really pointing to the mission to get the work out there into the public, and you know, throwing hands up at the institutions, not asking permission, and going right to the public with the art. And then the very different side of it of, you know, working through commission or grants and applying for opportunities that are quite difficult to do, which are very different ways in which you are getting the work out there, but are so intertwined with public art. And so maybe you can speak a little bit about those different aspects and what you hope to do between those.
You know, of course, in the framework of our class, we can hardly speak, or maybe we can speculate, or maybe imagine certain kind of commission, because it also certain form of delegation, like society delegate to do certain job for community. And of course, it should be somehow correlated with different kind of institution of control, public health, regulation, police, and so on. But it's also part of our communities. It's exactly where we come to the core of that, where politics starts, begins, you know. And at the same time, I hardly believe, that's why I'm really against that kind of bureaucratization of artistic labor, when someone from top down, you have the topics of competition and grant conditions, and you have to fulfill it. Of course, you have to deal with that, but I would definitely say that without your inner mission that you must do it, you can hardly move forward. And that's how that situation, how your personal vision can be adjusted to demands of community and society at large. I think it's actually at the core of all creative work right now. I don't know if I exactly answer your question, but somehow, yeah. And actually, altar, it's a very interesting practice. It's super vernacular. At the same time, it's kind of micro monumental practice, because actually it can be really small things like this somewhere, even hidden. It can really exist only as an oral history about something. Oh my God, I saw that on Second Avenue between, have you seen that small things? And then if it really positions with a certain kind of artistic narrative, it might create also quite interesting waves of response and also maybe be embedded into that kind of history of that kind of community. So I really trust in it.
I love what you just mentioned too, of like it could be secret or like hidden, because when we often think of public art, we kind of think of like some big monument or sculpture and metal and all the kinds of like mainstream art in public space. But we have performances in public space. There's like art troves. There's all this kind of hidden world of public art. So it's exciting that that will be a part of the course of kind of looking into the different ways that we can bring art to the public. Are there any questions that anyone has who's in the session? Okay, well, if you
Not
percolate
yet.
and get to the end, yeah, we can drop them in the chat and we can always cycle back.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Dmitry,
here,
for
yes, thank
insight
you.
into your class.
Mhm.
Yes, thank you. Erlin, are you ready to give us a little intro behind the scenes into your course?
Yeah, definitely. Hi, my name is Erlin. I'm super new here. This is my first time running this course. It's definitely not my first time teaching online. I've been, due to the pandemic, we've been on remote for 2.5 years. And in that time, I found teaching remotely and online to be interesting, and I found it to be a challenge, but I also found it to be a good challenge. I found different ways to also help students that also didn't want to be in person, accommodate them in a different way. And I was like, I thought this could be interesting. It also could fit into various different lifestyles, because I think as artists, sometimes we work many jobs, different hours, and I think that's just a really cool benefit for a school like this. So super excited to be part of the alternative school. And for my course, Meaningful Marks, I'm really taking an interpersonal approach to merging traditional aspects of painting and mark making into memory and pulling back from your own like sort of life memories and thinking back to, the color and form that you first seen as all the way back as, for us, the first colors and forms that you remember as a child, going into like, what are the objects that permeate within your space, and how do those objects resonate with you, and how do they sort of sit with you within this time, and how do you also, how do you render them? How do you pull them into reality within the capacity of also telling your current story, right? So I'm a traditional mixed media painter. I'm trained, like classically trained. I've been to art elementary, middle school, high school, undergrad, grad. And so I've definitely know the traditional art institution. And I think there's pros and cons to it. I think that the difficulty within those institutions is you have this really regimented approach to, this is how you make the mark, this is how you make the mark, and this is how you make the mark, and this is how you do it. For me, I really take a really unorthodox approach to, forming marks and creating meaningful marks, creating a approach to painting that's very you-centered, with at the same time giving you those traditional understandings of what elements to use and how to build up form in a way that would still articulate your ideas, right? And so experimenting again with color, experimenting with different conceptual approaches. We'll be looking at a number of different artists that also take unorthodox approaches, or very alternative approaches to making marks, because I think that sometimes major art institutions, so bigger universities, you don't really find that it fits your perspective. And I'm interested in this course more so helping the students to pull from their own space, their own memory, their own palette of ideas and concepts that permeate within our hearts. And so hence meaning, right? Like constantly pulling from the meaning around us in the world, and also working with the idea of being present, right? Like I think in everyday world, we're pulling and running and pulling. It's like I was back in Philadelphia, like I was saying, and right now I'm in Mexico, and it's so different. Like I realize I move a little slower. I think through my thoughts a little differently, as opposed to being in Philly or when I'm in New York, I'm like, oh my God, I missed the train, like, and so we'll also be discovering the ideas of, being present with, our own works and building, imagery and painting that has a youth-centered approach to it. And so also pulling into building our own lexicon, using our own words, inventing different words that have interpersonal meaning to what we specifically are speaking about, but then also in looking at theory and concepts from other painters. So I'll have a series of PDFs and readings that are also connected onto that as well too, for different approaches of color theory, form, texture, and also sound and objects also interconnected to the painting approaches as well. So that's my course, making meaningful marks.
Thank you, Erlin. It sounds really incredibly wonderful. And one of the things I can't help thinking about when you're talking is that your paintings, often the paint doesn't just go on a canvas, but it creates a space and an environment. And I know you're playing a little bit with, is it UI? Augmented reality? I've
been working around a lot of augmented reality right now, and I have a team of people working with me right now. And it's in a different approach. I like working in groups. I think that's the other thing we'll also speak about too, is and look at different artists that work, solo in the studio, to traditional painter working in isolation on the edge of society, but then also, alternative approaches where you open up the studio to the world and the community. And so right now I've been experimenting with it too, with augmented reality, and it's kind of been amazing at certain points. I'm like, oh my God, we can have this thing project here and come out and tell a different story. But then the contrast of that is also, oh my God, like I have to learn Maya. I have to learn, these different programs, or team up with people who really know them. And so, I will definitely share about that at the course.
Yeah, and it just makes me think about how meaningful marks, and I think when people think about painting and contemporary painting, they'll often think of a painting on a canvas. But I really love how your work kind of paints a whole world and an entire environment. And I guess I'm bringing this because I don't want people to just be restricted in thinking is just marks on a canvas, but the way that you make marks in your work. And we have a couple of questions in the chat that is kind of getting to this question of, would this class be appropriate for sculptors or ceramicists who decorate with mark making? And do you need to be a painter to take this course? So is there things that can be taken and gotten out of this course for non-painters from coming from a painting perspective?
I definitely think this course is open to non-painters for sure. It doesn't necessarily have to be painting centric. We'll be looking at also patterning and just different formations and thinking about redefining. I think especially now, this post-pandemic world, how do you get imagery to an individual, to the world, right? How can we use the internet in a different capacity also to think around painting, right? I think there is a traditional, oil on canvas, acrylic on canvas approach, and we'll look at that as well too. But generating, right? We have AI, we have augmented reality, we have all these different things, experimenting with different approaches. So I think understanding the traditions of where this thing comes from is important, but then the contemporary art world, right? You're dealing with NFTs, we're dealing with so much more. So I think that really thinking around what a painting can be, right, is going to be a large portion of this discussion as well. So that's a great question. And I definitely sorry. Yeah. I was going to say, I'm open to also working with sculptors as well. Sculpting and painting, the history of that is interconnected, definitely. So.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much, Erlin. I feel like I got a insight into your class and a peek behind the course description curtain, so to speak. I will now speak a little bit about the class that I'm teaching over the summer called Embodying Process. It's the 4th time I'm teaching this class with the Alternative Arts School. It focuses on our process that we have. It's a workshop that gives a lot of feedback between students. So the kind of at the baseline of the course, it's all about building community between us and also looking back at what are the what methods are we using in our creative process, and how can we kind of look at that process and refine or pay attention to different things that we might be missing or ignoring that helps heighten our creativity and bring about better processes for us. And then how can we sit in that process and not just fixate on the final product, but enjoy that process and really get a lot of experience through the process of making. So we do different exercises every week that helps bring questions back into the ways that we are making. And you are broken into groups with your peers and you get direct feedback on the project that you are working on. And by the end of the class, we are putting proposals together for an online group exhibition that focuses not only on these projects that we've been workshopping over 7 weeks together, but also on the processes that we enable to help make our work. And so sometimes these are little nuggets that come out of the class and are part of the show, but the uniqueness about the show that we put together is that it is focused on the process of making and the process of being an artist. And so that's a little bit about my course. And if you have any questions, please leave them in the chat. I often get the question of, what does the work in progress need to be? It can be a project you're working on. It could be some idea that is at the beginning stages of being formed, or it could be something that you've been working on. I have a student right now who's been working on a film for 10 years, and she just really wants to finish it. And so she came to take my class to kind of push past that final part and answer those final questions. And she just had her aha moment of like, oh my gosh, I realize what I need to do after 10 years of sitting with all this. And she's, let's just blocked out 6 weeks of her summer to finally finish this film. So it can really be like a project that's been on the back burner or an idea that you're afraid of getting into. I do a lot of intentionality with setting the space as being a safe space to be vulnerable. I believe that good art comes from vulnerability, and it takes care in that process and in that feedback that we're at when we're making. It's a tender space, and Instagram wants to see it all the time, and we're like, hey, we kind of need our privacy too. So come into the safe space and workshop your stuff with us. So if there's any other questions, please leave them in the chat. And I want to just thank our instructors for coming today, and thank you all for coming and listening to us speak a little bit about our classes. I know I'm really excited for them. I really want to take your intensive, Aaron. I feel like my art spirit needs it.
Yeah, come in, join.
I'm gonna see if I have time in my summer. Definitely. With that, I'm going to wrap this session up and wish you all a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you so much for coming by, and we hope to see you around in summer session.
Artists around the world, teaching artists around the